Chapter 7 Thief in the Night, August 16th, 1780. Basil stepped out of the pre-dawn darkness into the warm glow of the kitchen. He slammed the door angrily. After dropping an empty tin feed bucket loudly onto the floor, he stomped in the direction of his favorite chair. He mumbled as he strode, "I'm going to catch them. I swear I'm going to catch them. And when I catch them, I'm going to kill them with my bare hands." He plopped into the chair and then glared angrily out the window. His sister Martha took a break from kneading a pile of bread dough and cast a disbelieving glance at her mother. Elizabeth was checking to see if the breakfast porridge was fully cooked. She tapped her tasting spoon on the side of the pot, slowly pushed it closer to the flames of the fireplace, and then turned and faced her son. She placed both fists firmly on her hips. The twinkling firelight glistened in her eye, revealing her displeasure with her son's vulgar outburst. "Basil Billingsley, I will not tolerate such talk of violence in my own house. Do you understand me?" "Yes, mother," he stomped his foot, "but another one of my hens is gone." Elizabeth's stern look softened just a bit. She lowered her hands from her hips and took a step toward her son. "How many have you lost?" "7 in just as many days." "And you're certain that they are not simply escaping?" Basil rolled his eyes dramatically. "No, mother, chickens are not known to escape in the dark of night. Once they go to roost, they remain until morning." Elizabeth's eyes opened wide, surprised once again at the boy's disrespectful eye roll. "And you are certain that it is not a predator of some sort? A fox, perhaps?" "Most definitely not. There is no blood or any other sign of violence, not even loose feathers. Someone is robbing us, mother. The enclosure is closed and locked each evening and morning, and yet one chicken disappears every single night. It is the handiwork of a man, a thief. Whatever shall you do? Surely this cannot continue. How many hens do we have left?" queried Martha, pounding the pile of bread dough with her fist. "I am not yet certain what I should do," Basil frowned. "I counted 19 birds this morning. We only had 11 eggs yesterday. At this rate, we will be cleared out by the end of next week." "Are any of the hens broody and sitting on eggs?" his mother asked as she resumed her breakfast preparations. "Just one," Basil mumbled. "She's been sitting for just over a week now. I moved her to the smokehouse and stuffed 2 dozen eggs beneath her, so we should have chicks in less than 2 weeks." He looked concerned. "But that will be of little use to us if we lose all of our layers. We need our eggs. No one is selling or trading any right now." Elizabeth sighed. "Well, if there is a thief on the loose, he must be apprehended. It could be a vagrant or a wayward Indian. Shall I inform the sheriff?" Basil laughed sarcastically. "Sheriff Bingham, the hero who hid behind a tree whilst the Tories hanged Papa 4 years ago?" He snorted with disgust. "Not likely. No, this is my responsibility. I will take care of it on my own. I will catch this thief, and he will be sorry when I do." Basil awakened to a din of clanging metal mixed with the shrill, high-pitched screams emanating from the direction of the barn. Chickens squawked and clucked. Basil instantly threw back his bed covers and bolted for the door of his room. "I got him, mother! I got him! I have caught the bandit!" Basil did not even bother to put on his breeches or shoes. He grabbed his hunting gun from its resting place beside the door and ran as fast as he could down the stairs. Seconds later, he jumped barefoot off of the back steps and darted toward the barn. He saw a floundering lump of humanity on the ground just outside the door of the chicken house. The fellow was wrapped with a web of rope and string. After a dozen tin pails and bowls, each tied to the end of one of the ropes or strings, clanged noisily against the ground. Basil cocked his musket and aimed it at the thief. "Stop right there! Let me see your hands! I swear I will shoot you!" "Please don't shoot, mister," whined a high-pitched voice from inside the tangled web. "I ain't got no gun." 2 small pale hands thrust upward through the tangled ropes into the cool night air. The frightened, dirty face of a small lad shone through the netting. It was the voice of a child. Basil was confused. He had no expectations that a child would be guilty of stealing his chickens. He did not quite know what to do. Basil's mother and sister each appeared on the back porch, both of them carrying a beeswax candle on a pewter stand. His mother barked, "Put that gun away, Basil. It is just a little boy." Basil immediately lowered the weapon and released the flintlock hammer from its cocked position. He marched over to the entangled child and gave him a swift kick. "Ouch!" moaned the culprit. "Why'd you have to go and do that?" "Because you are a stinking little thief, that's why." "That is quite enough, Basil," Elizabeth declared. "Cut that child loose and bring him into the kitchen." The boy practically inhaled the half loaf of bread that Martha set before him. He washed it down with copious amounts of fresh milk. The boy was a pitiful sight indeed. He wore neither stockings nor shoes. His threadbare linen breeches had not been functioning pants for quite some time. They hung in tatters and shreds from his skinny hips. He wore a dark blue shirt with one entire sleeve missing. A tangled mass of filthy, matted hair stuck out haphazardly from his hatless head. "What is your name, boy?" inquired Elizabeth. "You do not look familiar to us. Is your family near?" The boy kept eating, intentionally ignoring Elizabeth's questions. "What is your mother's name?" Again the lad ignored the inquisitive woman. He looked away from members of the Billingsley family and stared at the window and door. It was clear that the little thief was attempting to discern a possible route of escape. Basil, now fully clothed and wearing his leather boots, kicked the lad harshly in the chin. "Answer her questions." The little boy responded with almost invisible speed. He jumped from the chair and lunged at Basil. He buried his knee in the older boy's belly and began to claw at his eyes. Basil was caught off guard at first, but quickly recovered and tossed the boy off of his lap and onto the rough wood floor. Quick as a flash, the little boy darted for the door. Basil caught him from behind just as his right hand was removing the locking latch. "I have had just about enough of you," Basil screamed. He grabbed the boy by the hair on the back of his neck and slammed his forehead against the heavy wood door. The blow stunned and temporarily immobilized the child. "Basil!" screeched Elizabeth. "Is that really necessary?" "Mother, did you not see what he just did? He is not only a thief, he is a wild animal, I tell you." The boy attempted to spin around and loosen himself from Basil's grip. The older boy merely tightened his hold on the lad. "Son, we mean you no harm," Elizabeth promised. "We just want to find out where you are from and why you are stealing from us." "Enough of this talk," Basil chirped. "Martha, help me get him to the necessary house. We will lock him in there, and I will go and fetch the sheriff." The boy's eyes widened with fear. "No, please, don't lock me up, and please don't call the sheriff." The wild little boy stared pleadingly at Elizabeth. She stared back, somewhat suspicious. "If Basil releases you, do you promise to sit down and behave?" "Yes, ma'am." And no more running for the door?" "As you wish, ma'am." Her eyes narrowed. "Because if you try that one more time, I shall turn you over to the sheriff." The little boy nodded hesitantly. "I understand." "Good," Elizabeth barked. "Now, sit down in that chair, show some respect, and tell me what I wish to know. Otherwise, I will be forced to summon the authorities." "The who?" inquired the boy, confused. "The authorities, the constable." The boy still looked confused. "She's talking about the sheriff, you stinky little thief," growled Basil. "Now, sit down and do as you're told." Basil loosened his grip and escorted the boy to the chair where he had previously been sitting. He obediently plopped down onto the slick wood seat. Elizabeth pulled up a chair of her own and sat down in front of him. She stared at him for a short while. The silence was most uncomfortable. "Do you have anything else to eat?" the boy asked hopefully, interrupting the silence. "Like a little chicken, perhaps?" Basil responded sarcastically. "We're running a bit low these days, I'm afraid." Elizabeth exhaled angrily. "You will remain silent, Basil, and allow me to speak to the boy." Basil's chin dropped in shame. "Yes, mother." Elizabeth turned her attention to the strange child. "First, let us begin with something simple. How old are you?" "I am 9 years old, but I will be 10 in July." "It is already August," Basil grunted angrily. "Well, I guess I am 10 then," the boy barked rebelliously. The little fellow stuck out his tongue at Basil. The older boy smirked and looked away. He did not want to interfere with his mother's interrogation. And what is your name? Elizabeth continued. The boy glanced at her, took a deep, resolute breath, and exhaled. Oliver Denkins. Denkins, she echoed. I am not familiar with that name. Are you from the northern part of the county? Who is your father? I am from round here, the boy responded curtly. Oh, where are you from then? Oliver hesitated for a moment and stared into the eyes of the woman seated in front of him. She had a kindly face. He decided that he liked this woman. He felt that he could trust her. I'm from Wilkes County. Where on earth is that? I have never heard of it, Martha declared from her seat in a distant corner of the room. Georgia. Elizabeth gasped. Georgia? Why, that's 150 miles from here. How on earth did you come to be in Guilford County? We've been wandering for a while now and just kind of stumbled onto the place. We? Elizabeth asked quickly. Are your parents with you? The boy's countenance fell. He slapped his leg and muttered what sounded like a curse under his breath. He had clearly given away a bit of information that he had no intention of sharing. Who else is with you, Oliver? Elizabeth demanded. The boy responded with almost a whisper. My sister, Anna. Oh, so you have a sister. Is she older than you? Oliver shook his head in the negative. Elizabeth's eyes widened with surprise. Oliver, how old is Anna? She's 5, I think. Martha gasped and rose from her chair. She ran to her mother and placed her hand on her shoulder. The two women stared at one another and in shock. Where is Anna? Martha demanded. Is she safe? Is she hurt? She's fine. I left her back at the cave. The cave? Shrieked Martha. You left a little baby girl alone in a cave? Her face flushed red in disbelief. Oliver shrugged. Of course, it was where we sleep every night. I never leave to go hunting until she's asleep. You mean to go and do some stealing? Basil remarked in anger. Clearly, Basil was not moved by the boy's story. Elizabeth slapped her son on the arm. He bit his lip and leaned silently back in his chair. He failed to see the point of all of the questioning. He simply wanted to give the boy over to the sheriff and be rid of the little stinker. Where are your parents, Oliver? Elizabeth asked quietly, kindly. The boy hesitated for a moment and took a deep breath. They're dead, ma'am. A reverent silence filled the room. Elizabeth leaned in closer and took the boy's hands in her own. How did it happen, Oliver? Did they die on the journey? A tear formed in the lad's eye. He shook his head. No, ma'am. Men came to our cabin and killed my papa. They strung him up in a tree. Mama hid us in the smokehouse. I watched everything through a crack between the logs. The men took Mama and hauled her off into the woods toward town. I heard her scream once. The tears swelled until it was huge and then cut a path downward through the dirt of his filthy cheek. I never saw her again after that. Who were they, Oliver? Indians? Bandits? No, ma'am. They were Tories. There was one man with them who wore a red coat. Was your papa in the militia? The child nodded and wiped a trickle of tear-induced snot from his red nose. Did you go to other family members for help? Your grandparents or an aunt or uncle? Oliver shook his head once again. We have nobody else. It was just us. The closest house is about a mile away. We went there, but them folks was all hanging from trees too, even the children. Martha covered her face with her hands and wept. Elizabeth squeezed her hands tightly. Long ago, how long ago did this happen, Oliver? It was right after Christmas. 8 months ago? She shouted in disbelief. And the two of you have been alone and wandering all this time? The boy nodded. Elizabeth cast a quick glance at Basil. Silent tears crawled down both of his cheeks. The angry youth had discovered that he and this homeless child had much more in common than he ever could have imagined. Elizabeth smiled knowingly at Basil and then turned his attention to the little boy. Oliver, I want you to lead Basil to your cave. You will take a horse and you will bring Anna back to our house. I will not have the two youngsters spending any more nights in the dark, damp caves. She stared at her son. Isn't that right, Basil? Her son, his heart His hard heart, suddenly softened by the plight of the two children, nodded in agreement. He swallowed hard and cleared his throat. Yes, mother, I will most certainly fetch her back. Well then, boys, be on your way. Take a blanket for the little girl and go quickly. It will be dawn in a couple of hours. Yes, mother, responded Basil, rising to his feet. Come along, Oliver. Basil's entire tone had changed. He politely escorted the boy to the door and pulled the latch. Before leaving, he looked back at his mother. She smiled and winked. Basil grinned broadly, wiped his cheeks, and then closed the door silently behind him. 3 hours later. Elizabeth, Martha, and Basil Billingsley sipped from their cups of steaming hot tea as they stared at the two children. The little ones were sleeping soundly in one of the empty beds in Basil's room. The soft light of dawn was just beginning to bathe the room with its purple-pink glow. How long will they sleep, do you reckon? Asked Basil. There's no way to tell, his mother responded, shaking her head. I can't even fathom how two little children have managed to survive in the wilderness on their own for all these months. And through the winter, no less, added Basil, with a measure of admiration. Well, whenever they do wake up, they are both getting baths. That much I do know, declared Elizabeth, and we shall have to wash those bed covers immediately. The poor little wretches are filthy. They probably have the itch, Basil commented matter-of-factly, and all manner of bugs and bites. Elizabeth nodded. No doubt that is true. Are we keeping them, Mother? Martha inquired bluntly, changing the subject. Elizabeth sighed. They are not stray cats, my dear. I know, Mother, but you know what I mean. We cannot very well turn them back out into the woods, can we? No, I do not suppose we can do that. She breathed deeply and pondered the situation. We must look out for their well-being. It is the Christian thing to do. It is what Papa would do. So then we are keeping them? Martha asked again wishfully. All three of them continued to stare at the sleeping children. Elizabeth took a sip of her tea. Yes, Martha, of course we are keeping them. Martha squealed quietly from excitement. Basil grinned, wrapped his arm around his mother's shoulders, and hugged her tightly against his side.